Once again, welcome to Revisiting Adobe Lightroom on Web Wednesdays here at H&H Color Lab. Today's class will be talking about Adobe Lightroom, and we've got a couple things that we'll go over in Lightroom, but before we get started, we have a little bit of business to take care of. First off, today's class is being recorded. We typically record these classes and then have them hosted on our website, usually within a couple days after the class. We're in the midst of revamping our web training section on the website, so it's taking a little longer to get some of those classes up there, but they're all going to be posted. Let me take care of that. Pam, you just unmuted your line, and I want to keep those muted so we don't get any background interference through. So you should be able to hear me over your phone on that. Okay. I'm going to go into a screen sharing mode here where you're going to be able to watch my desktop, and when I do that, you're going to notice that this control window that you were looking at has gone away, and there is a drop-down menu up at the top of the screen that you can see, and that will let you, if you click on that, so if you click on that, you're going to be able to bring down a participant window and as well as a chat window. So during the class at any time, if you have questions, feel free to type those into the chat, and I will do my best to answer those questions for you as we get going. Okay, so a couple things about Lightroom. We're going to cover 4 main points on Lightroom today, and before we get started, let me ask you, by a show of hands, and you'll see on the participant window, if you bring that down, how many people are using Lightroom today? So you should be able to click on a little icon on that participant window and let me know. So Mandy is using Lightroom. Great, thank you. So I'm assuming everyone else is not using Lightroom right now. If you're not using Lightroom, go ahead and click your hand up right now as well. Okay, so Pam's not using Lightroom. And once again, you can get to that participant window from the little drop down up at the top of the screen. Okay, great. So we've got one person that looks like he currently uses Lightroom, and then everybody else isn't. Okay, so that means that's great because it gives me an idea of what direction to come into Lightroom. And Mandy, let me ask you this, and if you can reply to this in the chat, how long have you been using Lightroom, and what do you look to get out of today's class? So while she's typing that in, there's 4 areas. Lightroom, we could spend all day talking about Lightroom today if we wanted to. We're going to be limited to about an hour and a half, so this class is going to go till about noon Central Time. And I've got 4 areas that I'm going to cover in Lightroom specifically. The first is importing into Lightroom and talk a little bit about catalogs in Lightroom. The second is going to be spend some time talking about keywording and why you would use keywording in Lightroom and go through that. Then we're going to talk about processing and correcting your image files in Lightroom. And then the last thing that we're going to do is go ahead and we'll go through and talk about how to export from Lightroom, how to get your files out and do other things with them. Thanks, Mandy, as far as how long you've been using and just want to learn a little bit more about that. Perfect. At the end of the class, I'm going to give you some reference material that I use, and I'll give you that information so you can, if you want further information, it's good places to check and go from there. So, without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and launch Lightroom here. Okay, and Lisa is looking, she has some keywords from a previous session and she wants them off. So I'm assuming those keywords are on some images that you currently, that the keywords don't belong to. Is that correct? Okay, perfect. So anytime during the class, feel free to type into that chat window if you need some clarification or if it brings up a question, and I will do my best to balance between all the screens. Okay, so on your screen right now, you should be seeing my desktop, and I launched Lightroom, And one of the preferences that I set up on my computer is to always prompt me for the catalog I want to open. I use multiple catalogs for a lot of different reasons. And you can use a single catalog, you can use multiple catalogs, you can combine catalogs together, and there's pros and cons for doing all of that. And it just depends on how involved, so to speak, you want to be with your Lightroom workflow. So for me, on some events, I just make a catalog for that specific event. For example, a wedding, I might make a specific catalog. So you can see, as I look through these names here, these are all different catalogs. I have one that's called Man Rutland. That was a wedding that I have in Lightroom. Another one, it was a family reunion that I did photographs at. Another one was for a specific customer that I pulled just some of his images in. But then I also have one called a master catalog that has everything of mine in it. Now, if you're in an environment where multiple people, and let me ask this as a question to the group, and you guys can respond in the chat or by raising your hands, how many people would need multiple people being able to get into a Lightroom catalog at the same time? So for example, you're working on some images that are in your catalog, and then you might have someone else in your studio needing to work on images in the same catalog. So let's see a show of hands on that or answer that in the chat. Okay, so Pam, you would need multiple people to access images in Lightroom simultaneously. Okay, so everybody else would be only one person. So for Pam, if you need people to be getting into Lightroom simultaneously across a network, Lightroom really isn't, that's not how it's been developed to be used. Now, there are workarounds for that, and there are unofficial solutions for that. And I see Lisa also commented that multiple people would need to access hers as well. So if you need to have multiple people access a Lightroom catalog, you might look at doing one catalog per event. That way, John can get into the catalog, and then Pam could get into a different catalog and be doing work simultaneously. The reason I say it that way is multiple people cannot open the same catalog at the same time. So for example, if I wanted to open up this master catalog, and then Pam, we were on the same network and you wanted to access it as well, you couldn't because I was already in it. So the workaround for that is to have individual catalogs per job. Now, as we get into the keyword section of this class, that has some downfalls for it that we may want to take into account. And for that reason, we may have individual catalogs for the clients, but then have a master data catalog to handle a lot of other information. So we'll talk about that a little bit in keywords. So to start off, and I'm going to open up my master catalog. Now this is my main catalog, and it's a very large catalog. And one of the things that I've noticed just doing these web classes is when I'm running my WebEx software, Lightroom, Adobe Bridge, and several other applications that I use regularly slow down significantly. Now, I'm going to let you know that in addition to telling you I normally don't see it slow down that much when I'm dealing with this catalog. So right now, if you look in my catalog over here on the left side of my screen, you're going to see that I have about 27,000 images in this catalog. So a lot of images. Now, just in reference, I'll show you a couple other things because this usually gets asked. If I go into this master catalog, the catalog itself is about 580 megabytes. So it's not a huge, I mean, that's going to fit comfortably on one CD. We're less than a gigabyte. Now, the previews for that catalog, or where it stores all the thumbnails, is about 5 gigabytes. So this master catalog folder is about 6 gigabytes of information between the catalog information, which is just a database, and the previews, which are all the little thumbnails that we're looking at. Now, the majority of that catalog physically resides on this hard drive called Images. And this hard drive, if we come in and look at the information on it, it shows its capacity is about 500 gigabytes, and I've used about 423 gigabytes of that information. So we see that right there. So that master catalog, which is a total space of 6 gigabytes, actually refers to 423 gigabytes of information. Now, why are you saying, why was Bentley talking about that? Well, one of the advantages of using Lightroom is I don't physically have to have that drive attached to be able to do sorting, to be able to apply keywords, to be able to do slideshows from my images in Lightroom. I can't develop or export them, but I can do a lot of work without actually having that physical hard drive plugged in and working on it. So that's an advantage for using Lightroom, and the ability to have those images on an external drive where I could move them from computer to computer is great. I could actually move that catalog to another computer if I wanted to as well and be able to continue working fairly easily. Okay, we're going to import a wedding now, or actually a job, and just go through an import procedure. Now, in my workflow, I choose to use a different downloading application as opposed to importing into Lightroom, but I can do that as well. So I can come in and just choose Import Photos. I can do that from my File menu up at the top. I can use the shortcut key Command-Shift-I or Control-Shift-I on a PC. I can also come down here to the bottom and choose Import. Now, if I have a compact flash card or an SD card plugged into my computer, it's going to automatically select that as the source up here. I can also browse to different locations. This Macintosh hard drive is my main hard drive on my computer. This B-Ski is my user folder on the computer. Images 2 and G Drive Mini are both external drives plugged into my computer. So I'm going to pull from Images 2, which is where I save all of my files. And you'll see in here that my folder structure right now is created chronologically. I have the year, month, and date, and then a description of that file if we look through these. So the job that I want to import is one down here that some images that were photographed in April that I want to import. Now, when I select that folder, or if I come to my compact flash card, it's going to give me a couple different options. Up here at the top of the screen, it gives me the option to copy as a DNG, which if I click on that, it converts them to a DNG into a new location, which I would specify over on the right, and then it's going to add it to the catalog. If I choose copy, it's going to take the images from where they are now and copy them to a new location. Again, depending on how my presets over here are on file handling are set. Move physically moves them to the new location and adds to the catalog. And then add just keeps the images where they are and adds to the catalog. So if I was coming off of a compact flash card or a card right out of my camera, I want to use any of the first three, copy as DNG, copy, or move. Me personally, I don't use the move option because if something got corrupted as it was moving it, I might lose that file. So I would either use copy as DNG or copy. In this case, since I already have the images on the hard drive where I want them, I'm going to use the add option. So it's going to add them to my catalog. I see this over here. If I chose copy, you can see in this area I can specify where I want those to go. Same thing with copy as DNG move. So I'm going to say add. I have options for rendering in previews, which is basically the thumbnail that I'm going to see. If you go with minimal, it's going to render these images very quickly. Your previews may not match what you see. When you click on the preview may change because it's using your camera's embedded thumbnail. If you use standard or one-to-one, it's going to take a little bit longer, but you're going to see a little bit more consistency in your color match coming across. I have checked don't import suspected duplicates just to make sure if there's a duplicate file, I don't want it brought in. If I had been using the copy as DNG, copy, or move, I can make a second copy and send that to an additional location. So if you're doing the import from that compact flash card, that may be a nice feature to take into account. You also have file renaming options that you can use templates, extensions, things along those lines if you're doing the copy or move. And again, since I'm doing the add, those don't apply to me. I've already done my file renaming ahead of time in my workflow. Okay, during import, I can apply different types of settings. I can apply, oops, clicked on the wrong thing, different types of looks. For example, if I want to make all the images look black and white, I can apply that preset. If I've created a custom profile or a custom look for my images, I could choose that here as well. That may come into place, for example, if you make a preset that says I want to apply a little bit more sharpening, I always want to emphasize or have a specific look I want to apply to all the files, save that as a preset and you can apply that on import and save yourself a step. Next is I can apply specific metadata, and so I'm going to make a new metadata preset. This is something that I do, and it's a good habit to get into, is to create one like these. So I'm going to type in a new preset here, and this is going to identify who I am on all of these images. I'm going to put in a copy name. Actually, that's in the wrong spot. I don't want to put that there. I want to come down to the copyright information and put in my name with a copyright symbol. If you're on a PC, you're going to hold down your Alt key, and on your 10 keypad, press in 0169. If you're on a laptop, if you look really closely on the M, comma, period, JKL, UIO 789 keys, you're going to see a little letter or a number, and if you hold down your function key, the FN, and then press Alt and use those, it would be M, L, 09, I think is your 169, or it's J09 would give you that copyright symbol. And on a Mac, it's just Option G. So I can type in copyright status. I can put in use, rights of usage. I can come in and create creator information. I'm not going to fill out the rest of my address so you can just find my street. I can put in created information. I could put in a lot of information that's going to identify those files. And if I wanted to put in specific keywords, so I'm going to put my name in as a specific keyword. So every time I use this Bentley metadata preset, it's going to put my name on all those files as a keyword. It's going to also put all that copyright information into the metadata of the file. So if the file goes to the internet, or I share that with the service provider or send it somewhere else, that information will be in it. Now you'll also notice there's an option here for additional keywords. And as we get further into keywords, this will make a little bit more sense. But I'll use this information for a keyword that would apply to everything in this image, or in these images that I'm importing. In this case, I have a variety of things I'm importing. We see some pictures here of some food photography. We see some pictures, it looks like, of an outside event, and then we see a picture of a girl playing saxophone. So there's not a common theme for all of these images. Now, if I was importing a portrait session, I might put in a keyword of the client's name. If it was a wedding, I might put in the Smith-Jones wedding. If it was a commercial job, I might put in who that job was for, so when I do the import. I can also come in and preview these images in two different ways. I can see one image at the time here, or I can also see them in a thumbnail view. I can choose what images I want to import or not import off of here. And with Lightroom 3, it gives me the ability to also import any movie files that I've captured on my media card at the same time. So we actually see some .mov files. So I'm going to import those just to keep track of them. I can also sort by capture time. There's all sorts of things that I can come in here and see how I want to bring these in. So, and you can also change the thumbnails down here at the bottom to make them a little bit easier to see. You'll notice that the movie files have that little movie icon playing on them. So I'm just going to choose now to import these images. And we see now in the upper left, those files are being imported in from that hard drive. They're being added to my catalog. If I select on one of those files, we'll see the keyword has my name typed in it that's been added. So we can see we have some basic metadata in these images right now. So importing is pretty simple. We can find these images as a previous import. We could also come into our folders over here on the left, and if we scroll through that folder directory and come down far enough, we can get to that folder of images as well and see those. So there's a couple different ways. Now, I know a lot of people that use Lightroom, and all they do is navigate through their hard drive here through the folder section. And that's an okay way of doing that, but there's other ways to do this that make more sense and are more geared to the way Lightroom works, which leads us into our next section, which is about keywording. So we've already applied some basic keywords to these images. We applied basically my name on import. So let's go in and keyword some additional things. Now, these are pictures of my stepdaughter and her grandmother, who every time her grandmother comes and visits, they make some type of decorative cupcake. So that's what we're looking at here. And this time it was some honeycomb cupcakes with little bees on those. So out of my library of 27,000 images, I want to be able to find these easily, and I might not remember which visit that was done on. So I'm going to start by keywording all of these images. So I'm just going to select that whole section. And in my keyword window over here, I'm going to type in cupcakes. I might also type in bees and honeycomb, because those describe those cupcakes. Okay? Now, because I had all those images selected at once, when I press enter on that, those keywords now are applied to each of those images. So when I click on each one individually, you'll see those keywords have been added. Now, I'm going to select all these images again, and this goes to Lisa's question, where I want to take some keywords off of this selection. So I'm going to come up here and just take out my name, just by highlighting it and press enter on it. So that has removed my name as a keyword off of all of these images. Okay? So all that's left now are the images that have bees, cupcakes, and honeycomb on them. So Lisa, hopefully that's a real simple way that you can grab those keywords off of those images that you don't want them on. Now, because I do want my name on these images, I'm going to come back and type it in correctly. And that's just been updated to all of those images now. So, how do I find these images? I want to keyword a couple more. I'm going to come in and keyword these two, and these go with Shelby, and band concert, and jazz band. So those are keywords that go with those images. And then this last one is just going to keyword it Shelby and saxophone. Okay, so I've just very quickly keyworded everything in this session. Now, one of the things that I will tell you is when you keyword on import, it's very easy, very quick to do. If you try to go back and keyword after the fact, then it's going to be difficult to get caught up. So it's a good habit to get in place as you import. So in a portrait world or a wedding environment, what things would make sense to keyword? A lot of times when you see people talking about keywording, they apply it towards commercial photography or landscape photography, nature photography. And very few people give good explanations why I would want to keyword for a portrait event or a wedding event. Well, let me give you some examples here of things that as I've talked with customers, and we've talked about keywording, and I said, well, are you using it? No. Well, do you do this? Do you do this? So let me ask you some questions. So how many of you are wedding photographers, if you'll raise your hands, or photograph weddings? And Lisa, I'm going to come back to your question. Okay, have a couple people that do weddings. Okay, great. How many people are do senior photography and do a lot of senior photography? You might do 50, 60, 100 different seniors. Okay, we've got same people doing the same thing. Great. How many people do just family portraits? Okay. How about how many people send out marketing pieces either via email, via a physical printed document, something along those lines? Okay. So for everybody that's raised your hand, there are reasons that you need to use keywords. You're like, okay, why? Well, let me talk to the wedding photographers. So I photographed a wedding, and I used to be a wedding photographer. I did weddings for about 10 years, and it was not uncommon, and I'm going to go date myself here, but back in the good old days of film, and we can determine if those were good old days or not, but back in the film days, it wasn't uncommon for once or two or three times a year, different vendors would call up the studio and ask, hey, we photographed some weddings, we worked some weddings together, and I'd like to get some sample images from you. Great, no problem. I'd be happy to do that. You know, give some cross-promotion here. What weddings did we photograph together? And then you'd have to start going through your calendar. Were you at the Smith wedding? No, we were at the Jones wedding that weekend. And it took forever to remember which weddings you photographed together. And then once you found the wedding, you had to dig through all of the proofs or all of the negatives to find pictures of the cake or the flowers or the reception venue or whatever it was, to provide those images to the client that, or to your co-vendor that you really are not getting a lot of money for. And it was very labor intensive. So today the way I would do that is keyword those images. So I just imported this wedding, and I'm going to type in, I'm going to just grab another way to apply keywords here, which is using this spray can, and I'm going to type in florist. So any pictures that are a close-up of the flowers or I think are a good shot of the flowers, I'm going to tag with florist. So I'm just going to spray paint. I just applied florist to this picture right here. I'm going to keep going through these and see very quickly what else may apply to the florist. So in this case, if I wanted to be more specific, I would put in the name of the florist, the company. Is it XYZ Florist or whoever? Okay, so I'm just going to quickly look through these and tag florist. I think I'll do this one as well because they probably did that. And if we come down here a little further, that looks good. How about changing this now to caterer? So I'm going to spray paint caterer on a couple of those. And I think I'm going to also type in reception. So on these, you would want to type in like a reception hall, wherever it was located. So now if somebody calls me up and says, we did a bunch of weddings together, I can say, no problem, I can get you some images very quickly. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. So we're going to come over here on the left side of Lightroom here and go into our collections. And I'm going to click on this drop down, and I'm going to create a new smart collection. So when I click on that smart collection name, I'm going to call this florist. And I can save this in a specific set or none, which I'm not going to put it in any. And I'm going to come here and choose keyword as a sort option. And I want the keyword to contain florist. So I'm going to say create. And Lightroom just looked through 27,000 images and said, hey, you've keyworded 3 images with the word florist on it. And there they are. Very quick and easy to find. So if I wanted to modify that one, let's type in reception. That was a keyword we used. Press save. There's the 4 reception images that we keyworded. So I could create, by putting those keywords in, I can sort for things very quickly and easily. So there's an example for a wedding photographer, how to keyword for vendor partners that you work with. I'll also use keywording to help sort my wedding down for building my album. I'll keyword for bride, for groom, for bridesmaids, for wedding party, for family, and create sets to help me sort through those images very quickly and easily. Okay? Let's talk about senior photographers. Again, why would I keyword? Well, I want to keyword for the senior name, just helps me keep track of the image. I'm going to keyword what high school they went to. So if I need to do a sort for, if I want to do a marketing piece for a specific high school, I just need to make a smart collection for XYZ high school. Boom, there are all the seniors from that high school that I photographed. If you're doing a lot of seniors and you're using Lightroom and you also have to provide a yearbook picture to the school, then you can make a more complex keyword or search. So let's do one in here. I'm going to create a smart collection, and I want the smart collection to contain the keyword Roberts. I'm going to also have it contain another keyword, and I want it to contain bride. So this is going to match all of the following rules and bring those up. So there's all the pictures from that Roberts wedding that have the bride in them that I've keyworded. So if I do a keyword collection back to seniors that has the name high school plus the name yearbook, and when they selected an image that I want to tag for yearbook, I put that in a keyword. So now I can find all of the yearbook pictures from a specific high school and do them as a group export very quickly and easily. I can also use that. I have a customer in Denver that uses Lightroom for their senior photography, and besides doing high schools, they'll keyword if it's one of their senior models that they use. They'll keyword for specific activities if they're, for example, an honor student, or if they're on the football team, or if they're in different activities. So when they come time to do a marketing piece, they can pull those specific images very quickly and have a targeted marketing piece for a specific high school with the type of students they want to look forward to or bring up. So hopefully that gives you some ideas how to implement keywords into your workflow and why you would want to look at using keywords. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick break here from the official part of the class and go and answer Lisa's question. Lisa, to clarify, so if you go in and erase the keywords off of there, do they come back the next time you open the session? Or are they gone and the next time you import images, those keywords appear again? And while Lisa's typing that question or that answer in, if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to type those into the chat window and I will answer those as well. Okay. Something that I would check, Lisa, when we did that import earlier, look and see if you have apply during import metadata settings. Go in and edit that setting and look at the bottom of the setting and see if you have keywords applied to that metadata preset. So for example, on my name, I've typed in Bentley Ski down there at the end. Check to see if you have presets in there. I'm guessing that may be one place that they're being added. Without actually looking at how you import, I'm not sure where else I would go, but that would be the first place that I would check on that, okay? So, talking through keywords, some of the things that you've seen me do, you've seen me select an image up here, physically type in the keyword here. You've also seen me come down and use this spray can and paint keyword information across images. But you'll also notice that I can do a lot of different information on there. I can paint settings or metadata. There's a lot of different ways to use that spray paint can to add things. I can also do different types of sorting down here at the bottom of the screen. I can view my images in either grid mode, or I can view it in a one-up mode. And the one-up mode is a nice way to go through and do your picks. Which images do I like? Which ones don't I like? Now, keywords are all part of a big, larger set of information called metadata. Metadata contains the keywords. It contains our EXIF data from our camera, so I can come in and see the exposure information, white balance information from the camera on there. I could come in and see all sorts of information on this if I wanted. I could see where it was located. Metadata could also may have some comments in there. I could also have metadata contain rankings, like a 1-star ranking or a 2-star ranking, which I may use those to help choose or organize my images. I can also organize my images by using the picks and rejects. So the shortcut for a pick is P, which flags that image, and you can see down here I have a little white flag now. I can also, or I can change that to a rejected image, meaning I don't want to see it. And there's all sorts of ways to filter those. So one way to filter without using smart collections, I'm going to come back into my all photographs here. I can choose when I'm in grid mode, right down here on the left. I can use attributes up here. So in my all photographs, I can come in and say attribute. Show me the ones that have been flagged. Show me the ones that are more than or less than a certain star ranking. Show me the ones that have different color ratings. Show me all the files that are movie files or masters, the virtual copies, or videos. So if I click on videos, we'll see I have 5 videos imported into my Lightroom catalog. Okay? I can also sort things by coming in and saying, I want to sort by metadata. And it starts with 4 basic categories up here. So I could come in and say, I want to see all the photographs that I captured in 2006. Boom, there they are. If I wanted to drill down into that, I could say, show me the ones that were captured in April 4th of 2006. Well, apparently I was at a Holiday Inn Express that night because I took pictures there. Hopefully I was smarter for that. If you've seen the commercials, you'll get the joke. Okay, so I can use a library filter for things like that. I could also come in and say, I want to see which images were taken with what type of camera. I used to have a Canon G5. Well, there's the images that were taken with the G5, so there's some airplane images. It looks like must have been in Las Vegas because that's the M&M store. So there's some stuff in there of that. Let's see what else is in here. That's still Las Vegas, on and on and on. So apparently I took a lot of pictures in Las Vegas with that camera. I had a Canon S70. It's another camera. There's some Christmas party I took it to. Coming down further, I can see Nikon D2X. There's some pictures with that. So I can sort by that. I could also come in and sort by what focal length did I use, or change that. I want to see specific ISOs. Now, this is the great one that I use. If I want to verify or look for images that have a lot of noise in them, okay, these images were shot at ISO 3200. So I could apply different types of noise filters to those. And those were the only ones shot at ISO 3200 shot in 2006. If I change that date back to all my images, I can see ones that were shot at different ISOs. So for example, 17 images shot at 26,000 or 25,000 ISO. That obviously was taken with my Nikon D3 because it's the only one that goes that high. So you can use these up here for doing all sorts of filtering. You can also filter up here by text. So I want to search for keywords, and I want to search for Mini. I have a Mini Cooper. And I want to change all these other things back to everything, so I'm not limited myself. So these are all pictures of Mini Coopers or Mini Cooper events that I've been to. So it's a quick, easy way to find images when I don't want to make a smart collection. So there's another way to use metadata. So hopefully that's given you some ideas on how to use metadata, but also how to use these search filters up here at the top. So I can search for Roberts. I'm going to take off the metadata filter and just use text, and there's my Roberts wedding that I found very easily. Okay? Now, let's go into a specific group, and let's talk about processing images. So I'm going to use this metadata up here to find that group of images. Boom, there I am. And we're going to talk about raw processing and the develop module next. So leading into that, I can use, and I'm going to grab a group of images here. I'm going to sort these images by capture time. Scroll down a little bit so we can see groups of images that were shot similar. So I can see, for example, this range of images that is highlighted right there. That range of images looks darker than the ones around it. So I can use my quick develop here to say I want to make it lighter or darker, and just do a very quick process on those. Now I'm using the double arrow, which moves them very quickly. I can use a single arrow so it's not as quick and fine tune it. I could also use those for white balance or changing color. So if I want to do some quick, just really rough adjustments, this is a fast, easy way to do that. Come in and adjust things using these controls. Now, to actually get in and fine-tune some adjustments, we're going to go to the Develop module. Now, when we're on the Develop module, you'll see down here at the bottom, I have my film strip of images that I can come through, and I can click on any image and bring that up into the Develop module. So hopefully you're seeing on this screen that this image is pretty significantly overexposed. So let's look at what tools we have in our Develop module. The first thing to know is when I'm in the Develop module, over here on the left side, I still can get into my collections to sort for things. I have a navigator that lets me, if I zoom up on the screen, I can move that around to see different areas. I can apply different types of presets to the image, and as I hover over, I can see those different presets in there. I can see snapshots. If I've made a snapshot, it's like a history state. I can also see history, which shows things that I've done, and we'll come back and then see those. Now, moving over here to the right side of the screen, first off, let me go back to fit that in there again. I see my histogram. If I click on these two triangles, it's going to give me warning values for over and underexposed. In this case, where it's showing up red on my screen, that lets me know that I'm overexposed. Okay? If the image was underexposed and I clicked on the left triangle, it's going to give me a blue color, or the blue, whatever channel is underexposed. The next tools are how I can crop my images. I can do some specific adjustments, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on. I can come down further, and I have my basic adjustments. This is where I can adjust my white balance. I can come in and either click balance on the image, and wherever I click is going to make it go neutral. I can also use my temperature and tint sliders to adjust visually if I want to. So that's how I can change color on there. And I can always go back and click balance to set that where I want to go. You'll notice when I'm using that eyedropper tool, I can click on it to bring it out to use it. And then when I'm done, I just put it back in that circle again. The same type of thing happened when we used the spray paint can to paint metadata. Exposure, recovery, fill light, and blacks. These are how I adjust the density of my image. Exposure is going to adjust the highlight areas of the image. Recovery will bring back highlight detail that was lost by adjusting the exposure slider. So if I had an image that I brought that originally had detail in the whites, but I lightened it up to change the exposure look of it, and I've lost some highlight detail, recovery can bring that back in. Recovery will not bring back highlight information that was lost because the image was overexposed. Fill light is going to bring in the mid-tone areas. It will either lighten them up, it can lighten those up, and then black is going to adjust the black point on our image. So as I'm adjusting that and looking at it, I'm just sliding it back and forth. If you look here underneath her hair, by her jawline, you'll see as I go back and forth, that gets a lot of detail and loses detail. The further to the right I go, the more detail I lose, and you'll notice I turned the clipping off there. You can see I can block that up pretty good when I'm looking at that. Okay? So we'll talk about how to adjust those specifically on images in just a minute. You can also use brightness and contrast. For my work, I find that I very rarely touch those two, that I can get what I want from those two by adjusting these four and have a little bit finer control. Next we have our presence, which is where we can adjust clarity, vibrance, and saturation. So let me jump over to a different image here. Let's say that one right there. So as I bring my clarity up, you'll see that I'm basically increasing what's called edge contrast. Let's zoom up on this and look here on our face. As I bring that way up, you can see that we've really accentuated her hair. We've over-sharpened her skin. We're seeing a lot of texture in that. If I take that clarity and go the opposite direction, you can see that it's starting to smooth out her hair and skin. So it's something that, and if you look at it really close, it's just really increasing the edge contrast of the pixels. And the further we go, the more it can bring in there. So it's not bad to add a little bit of clarity, and again, based on taste, you may add more or less depending on what you're doing. Okay? Vibrance. Zoom out. Vibrance is, to a certain extent, a smart saturation filter. If you use, or slider, if you use saturation, you'll notice as you bring that to the right, you can really affect skin tone on an image. Okay? Everybody get that kind of oompa loompa. It brings up the saturation on the image globally. If we use vibrance, it's going to bring the saturation up on, I've heard it described a couple different ways. Ben Wilmore, who does a lot of teaching on Lightroom, describes it as a mellow tone. And he has a way of describing mellow tones, and it is the kind of the muted tones in the image. For me, what I see when I use it, and it depends on the image, but it tends to, for me, adjust the cooler tones in the image quicker. So it's going to bring up the blues and the greens. It's going to accentuate them faster than it's going to accentuate the yellows and the reds. So as I'm doing that, you'll notice I can crank that up and look at how it brings up that detail in that background, but it doesn't move her skin as fast as if we had used vibrance or saturation. So there's vibrance brought up to about a 60. She's still got a good skin tone and nice hair. If I bring saturation up to 60, we see her hair is starting to go really orange. We still have that nice look in the background, but we've started to affect her skin tone or hair. So vibrance is something that I use a lot on portraits to help pop up the backgrounds or different colors in the image and not overly affect the skin tone. Again, depending on the scene and the camera will determine how hard you could bring that up. Okay? So that explains those just a little bit. Now you'll notice that if I double click on any slider, it always resets it back to the default location wherever it started out as, okay? So it's another good trick to know. So let's lighten that image back up again. So let's come down a little bit further. So that's the basic tab. If we come under tone curve, if you like working with curves, you have ways to do that. You have a targeted adjustment tool. So if I click on that little arrow there, I can click on specific areas of the face, and just by dragging my cursor up and down, it's tweaking that area of the curve. So if I wanted to make the highlights a little bit brighter, I want to take the shadow area, bring that down a little bit. I want to go to a mid-tone area, lighten up the mid-tone. Just by clicking in different areas of the image, I can adjust that tonal range. And you can see it's now changed my curve accordingly. I could also come in and just use the sliders down below if I wanted to, but there's not much fun in that. So I like using the targeted adjustment tool if I'm working on these to come in and make adjustments. Okay? Tone curve. Next, HSL, color and black and white. Let me go to a different group of images and we'll talk about that, but that lets you adjust the hue, saturation, and luminance. It also gives you a really nice way to convert an image over to black and white and use channel mixer type sliders to fine tune. So if I want my reds to be a little bit lighter, that's going to lighten up for sweater. I'm going to do the same thing with the oranges. I can make my blues go a lot darker. That's going to darken up the background. The blues, aquas, and greens, I can change those. So I can do quite a really accentuate how I want that image to look by using that HSL slider options. And we'll do that a little bit more. I'm going to change this to black and white and then bring up split toning as my next option. Split toning allows you to affect, either the highlight area or the shadow of an area of an image and apply a certain tone. So I'm going to drag the saturation up, and you can see right now my highlights are set to red. As I move that slider through there, I'll get different colors that show up. So I can go to green, I can go to a blue look. So if I like a blue toned black and white, I can affect my highlights to get that blue tone. Let's say I don't want the highlights to go blue, I want my shadows to go blue. Well, then I'm going to do the same thing, bring my shadow slider up, change it into blue, and then bring up the saturation to get the look. So now you see my shadows have gone blue, and the highlights are still pretty neutral. Now, if you really want to go out, and especially if you want to mess up a color caller, change your highlights to yellow, because yellow is the opposite color of blue, and add some saturation. So now you have crossover in the image. You've got yellow highlights and blue shadows, which to a color caller, if they're trying to neutralize the image, is going to drive them bonky. They're going to go out of their mind trying to fix that. So just be aware of that. Now, if you're trying to get a specific effect, it's a neat way to go in and do some things. There's also some things with split toning that are great if you're doing restoration work. There's some times that split toning can come in and help that pretty significantly, and I'll show you one of those a little bit further on. Okay, detail brings up our sharpening, and the default sharpening is not bad. I find for me, if I'm shooting with a Canon camera, I tend to bring that up into the 50 range. That's typically where I'm setting it if I'm using a Canon 5D or a 5D Mark II. I also, the lab owns those cameras that I shoot with quite a bit. I also shoot personally with Nikon and have a Nikon D3. And for the Nikon camera, I tend to bring that up a little bit higher on the D3 and bring that up into the 70 to 75 range. So whenever you're adjusting with sharpening, it's recommended to view that at 100% so you can see what you're doing to the image. Okay? So since this was a Canon, I'm going to bring that back down into the 50 range. You can also do noise reduction, and I'll bring up a noise reduction image to show you how well this works. It does a good job, especially in Lightroom 3. In fact, I'm going to jump to another catalog real quick that's going to show you some things. But before I do that, let me point over here now. I talked about history earlier. As we go through that history, we can see all the different things that I've done to this image. At any point, revert back to any one of those states. And as I hover over the image, you can see up in the upper left corner a preview of what's going on. Okay? So we could even go back to where we first imported the image, which looked something like that, if we wanted to. Let me go into a different collection here, and I can cover some different things a little bit better. I'm going to go back and touch on these. Let's talk about HSL and go into this image right here. And let me remove that crop off that image so we can see the whole thing. And go into that HSL slider. So this is a neat way to use HSL. One, I can use it to accentuate colors in the image. So, for example, this kind of mustardy yellow that's in the background. I can change that tone by adjusting the sliders here on the screen. So here I've made it go to a more green tone. I can also use the same target adjustment tool. If I grab it, come in and click on that area, and as I drag up and down, you can see it's going to adjust the tones of that area. So on this image, what's really neat to do is I want him to have a different color shirt. So his shirt is in that aqua and blue range. So I can click on his shirt, and as I switch that, he now is wearing a purple shirt. Very quick and easy. Didn't have to mask anything. Didn't have to do any selections. Quickly changed the color of his shirt. And you notice because his glasses were blue, they switched along with his shirt. If I come in and go to saturation, well, now I want him to have a gray shirt. So I'm going to click again on that gray and drag it down. So now he's wearing a gray shirt. What's neat about this image is because there's no other blue, purples in the image, that's really the only thing that got affected significantly. I can also come in into luminance, click again on his shirt, and either lighten it up or darken it down. Now, it's starting to grab a little bit of tones in the background, but I can see how that's making those adjustments coming in there. So that's a great way to see what hue, saturation, and luminance can do to an image. Let me look at this set. Nope, I want to go to, I've got another collection here. Oh, here we go. Something else that we can look at. Let's go with this set here. This was shot with a really wide angle lens. If we jump to the metadata, I think it was like a 10.5 millimeter lens. But in CS or in Lightroom 3, we have lens correction, which I can turn on, enable lens correction. It sees that this was shot with a Nikon and it was with a fisheye, so it automatically applies a profile and to kind of try to take out some of that lens distortion. I can also come in and fine-tune it however I want if I want to tweak that and do a little bit more. This is a great example. You can see this image has a lot of barrel distortion in it. Again, shot with a fisheye lens. If I enable that lens correction, you can see that it does a pretty decent job of trying to straighten out that distortion and give me a little bit more of a realistic look. So that's a really handy thing to have in there to work through on lens correction. Let me show you a little bit about the noise reduction. And I'm going to take this noise reduction off. This image was photographed with a point-and-shoot camera and was photographed at ISO 1600. And so it is really, really grainy. And when you look at it, you can see with Lightroom 3, I'm applying a different camera calibration. I'm using the most current process. If I go to Lightroom 2 or older, or if I'm using Photoshop CS4 or older, you can see how much color noise showed up in this in the old process. So I'm going to use the new process on that. And you can see that now it just looks like decent grain in there. It's not as bad for the color noise. If I come in the Detail tab and start applying noise reduction to this, it does a nice job of smoothing out that noise and keeping pretty decent detail in the rest of the image. I do lose some information, but not a ton. So you can do some nice stuff with that noise reduction. You also have effects that you can work through. You can come in and apply different vignettes. So I can do a light vignette or a dark vignette on my image. I can adjust how that looks if I want it really round, if I want it more square, the amount of feather on it, all sorts of things. So that's a nice thing. The other thing you can do is add more grain to the image. So if I've overly smoothed that out, but want to come back and add some grain to it, that's a great thing to do. Another hint is if I have a variety of images from different ISOs that I'm trying to composite together and they don't look the same, try adding grain to all of them to give them a similar look, and that might help them blend together a little bit more. So keep that in mind looking at images. It can be really handy for you. The last one is our camera calibration. And camera calibration by itself can be a really scary area to get into. It's for tweaking colors that don't come out right. If you're working to try to match two cameras together so they look more similar, a great thing to do is to check out the X-Rite Color Passport, and you can generate color profiles for your camera individually. And that's a whole nother class to talk about, so we're not going to talk about that here today. Okay, so that's our basic controls to go through. So now let's actually come in and look at fixing some images where how I would do that. I'll also let you know that I have the steps that I'm about to go through. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because we've got about 30 minutes left, and I need to cover actually developing the image and then exporting. These steps I have in a PDF that at the end of the class I will post, and they are very similar. I've done the same things in Adobe Bridge, so I'm going to use the same terms that I use in Bridge as I do in Lightroom, so that document's going to work either way for you very easily. So I'll share that at the end of the class. So let's start by looking at a range of images, and I'm going to come into my Basic tab. First thing I always do is get my white balance correct. Now, I'm going to select these 4 images down at the bottom of my screen simultaneously so that as I correct one, you're going to see they're all going to get changed together. And to do that, I need to set my sync to auto sync. So as I make a change, come on, where did I click on wrong? There we go. You'll see that those change together. So you see those all now have kind of a cyan cast to them. If I click on the gray, it updates those 4 together because I have that auto sync turned on. If I adjust exposure, I'm going to make it really dark. Those 4 thumbnails will get updated as well down there across the bottom of the screen. Okay? So first thing to do, click on a neutral to get your white balance. You can do that by eye, depending on how good you are at seeing color. Depending on the quality of your monitor, you may be okay. And other times, it may be best to have some reference to click on. I always start with a reference because it's going to get me very consistent. Okay? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of the images with a lot of skin tone. I know if I highlight this image, I'm going to turn on my warning tones to find the brightest part on her face. So I can see right there up in her forehead, see that little dot of red that's showing up. That's letting me know those values are brighter than 255. Now in Lightroom, it doesn't show us brightness as 0 to 255. It shows us as a percentage based on a whole bunch of technical mumbo-jumbo and color management features that you may or may not want to even get into. So if you're interested in that, give me a call sometime and we'll talk about that privately, but I'm not going to go into it here because we would eat up the rest of our time and not get anywhere. So what I want to do is set those really bright values to about 94%. At that value, it's going to give me good skin tone that's going to have good printable detail. So if I hover my cursor, wherever I move my cursor around, so it's my hand right now, if you look at those RGB numbers that are right underneath the histogram, so right up here is where the histogram is. When I move my cursor on the image, you're going to see some RGB numbers show up right there. So now you should see those, right? Okay, so I'm seeing my red channel is at 99.7. The red channel on skin tone will always be your brightest channel if you've got a good white balance and you're not photographing Martians. So I want to make that number be about 94%. So I'm just going to remember where that is, come over here to the exposure slider, start sliding it down, go back and check that value and get it about 94%. So I've got it in that range, 92, 93. I think I like that. I'm going to check over here on her nose. And if I move real carefully, all right, there I see I got a little bit 95. So I may want to darken that, but you know what? That doesn't bother me too much. So I'm going to use that to kind of set my brightness. I'm going to zoom out. The next thing that I do is I jump down to my blacks. If I hold down my Alt or Option key and click on blacks, as I slide that up, you see how it starts going dark? That shows me where the blacks are clipping. I like to get just a little bit of black to show up in her eyes. So if I'm going to zoom up on those, you'll see it a little bit easier. If I click on that, and I don't know if that's refreshing well, you can see right there up in her eye, that little bit of tone shows up in there. That's kind of like where I like to set that. And again, that's going to vary based on my base exposure in my camera, how high I need to set that number. for me, that's what I like. Now, I may also come in and just add a skosh of clarity and vibrance. So that has applied those corrections to those 4 images. Now, I'll just come down here and grab the next 4 images, and I'm going to come through and do the same thing. I'm going to click balance. Grab one of the images. This one I can see is looking a lot darker, so I'm going to start by brightening it up and getting those values into that 94% range. So I went a little bit too far there. I'm just kind of going back and forth. And after you've done this for a little while, you'll start to be able to eyeball those a lot better. Now, this is the case where as I've lightened up that image, I'm starting to lose a little bit of highlight detail. So I might just come back and add some recovery to bring in a little bit of those highlights that I'm starting to just barely lose in there. Same thing, because this was underexposed, I will lower my black point. I may not have to bring it up as high, and it's going to apply that across the next 4 images that I selected. So I can use those techniques to quickly move through images. So I'm going to grab another set. Here's a series that's really overexposed. We'll click balance on that. Come in and start darkening that up to where it needs to go. Spot check in there. I need to bring that up just a little bit more, went a little bit too far. And on this one, the blacks were just about right. So I can make those adjustments very quickly. Okay? Like I said, I'm going through this section fairly quickly, but I've got some good notes that I will give you that you can work with to help review that. And also, we have a class, it's on Adobe Raw, that will you can go into and get a lot more detail out of this. This image is a great image to illustrate the fill light slider. We can see the shadow side of her face is pretty dark. I've got the highlight side of her face about where I want it as far as density, maybe come up a little bit more there. Okay. Now, if I use my fill light, you can see I can start to lighten up that shadow detail, and it's kind of like bringing in a reflector. It's not a substitute for doing correct lighting in the camera, but if you have something that you need to adjust a little bit more, it's a great way to come in and fix that. Okay? Now, let's talk about our presets a little bit more. Come over here into presets, and I'm going to make a preset. So I'm going to make a preset that I always, like I said, I'm going to add about 15 vibrance and 20 clarity. So on my presets over here, I'm going to click on the plus, and I'm going to call this plus 20 clarity, plus 14 vibrance. And I can choose what settings that I want to apply over here. So I'm going to turn off everything on effects. And the only thing that I'm going to turn on are the clarity and vibrance here under color. So that's the treatment section. You see I turned those 2 on and say create. So now you see that preset has been selected. So if I choose a set of images here, so I grab this image here, there's no clarity or vibrance set to it. Once I click that preset, it automatically applies it for me. So I can actually grab a range of images and apply that same preset to all of them, and it happens automatically for me. So you can create presets for different types of effects, for black and white, for noise reduction, all sorts of things. There's a lot of people who sell presets as well, so you can find presets online and purchase them. And there's a lot of presets you can get for free as well. Okay, let's go into some advanced processing here. Let me go into that teaching collection again. And let's look at this image right here. I talked about copy work and doing restorations and using split tone. This is a perfect example where I've got a very neutral white on the image, but because the print has faded, it's not looking very good. So I'm going to lighten that up just a little bit and hide that toolbar there to bring that up a little bit larger. I'm going to go into split toning. So if I look at this image really closely, My whites are neutral, but everything else, shadows are getting a reddish cast on it. So I know the opposite color of red is kind of a cyan. So I'm going to take and grab the shadows and kind of move it into a cyan range. So you can see it's moving back and forth. And as I change that saturation up, I'm trying to get it to neutralize some of that stuff in the background and fix it a little bit better. So there we can see it has done a pretty decent job of neutralizing that out. If we look at the history, actually I'm just going to do a snapshot here. And then let's go back to our custom white balance and exposure setting and do a second snapshot. I'm just going to call it ADJs. So we can see we went from this image here with the red tone on it to neutralizing that out. Now I'm still going to need to do some Photoshop work on that, but I'm not going to have to work as hard in correcting that. So doing that through Camera Raw. Okay? So that's a great example for split toning. Let's look at another image and go to a different collection. Okay. Let's go with this image right here. And I'm going to talk about these tools here. We I touched on cropping. I can crop in here. I can specify aspect ratios. So if I want a 4:5 aspect ratio, it will show that on here. I can click and drag to adjust the crop. If I want to go from horizontal or vertical, I just drag the crop the other direction. And again, I can batch apply that crop across images if I wanted to. So let's bring this image in, and I'm going to actually just remove the crop on that. Take it all the way back out. This next icon is our clone or healing brush. We can use that for removing camera dirt or doing very light retouching. Zoom up on the image here. Come up to the top of the screen. So let's say I want to get rid of those concrete marks. I'm going to bring the brush size down, click, and then drag, and it's bringing in different areas for retouching. And depending on whether I have it set to clone or heal will determine how that acts. Heal is going to keep the texture and bring the color over. Clone is going to actually replace it with something else. If I'm on clone, bring this spot over. Actually, I'm going to go from here to there. You can see now I've added that spot to it. I'm going to reset all of those. If I'm on heal and come from here to here, it's just going to bring those textures over, and it's not going to be as noticeable. Okay? Really handy for getting rid of camera dirt. You can do some light retouching with it. The red eye tool works really well. If you've got an image with red eye in it, excuse me. Next one over is our gradient tool. And what this will do is allow us to use these preset values down here. So let's start and say I want to lower my exposure. And so I can click and drag a gradient across the image, like a graduated filter. So you can see down here at the bottom, as I use the exposure, it darkens that up. If I go to the right, it lightens it up. Based on how much, I have to use my mouse for this, it works better than my Wacom tablet. I can change the amount of feather by how wide or tight that is. So let me accentuate that again. So you can see here, it has a very tight transition. As I drag that wider, it starts to smooth that out and is more gradual. Okay? So you can use that to come in and say, I want to saturate that water. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. So you can see I'm adjusting the saturation of just that lower area. I can take it to go black and white. So using that gradient is really handy to come in. It also can rotate it. If you grab the center, You can say, okay, I want to rotate that to vertical and get a different look, or I can go this direction. I've actually used this on a couple occasions when a customer has had flash sync errors where they had part of this, their image darker because their shutter speed was too high, to help even it out as long as there was detail there. It does a nice job on that. Okay, so that's the gradient graduated filter. The next one over is our brush tool. It's like the graduated filter, except instead of being applied to a specific part of an image or to a specific area of an image, we can come in and apply it to a specific part. So I'm going to drag up the saturation. I'm going to make sure my auto mask is off right now, and wherever I brush, it's going to increase the saturation on that. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit, bring my flow up, and you can see that that blue reflection up under the concrete there is a lot stronger. I can also come here and brush it across the bottom of the image and increase the saturation there as well. So there's a quick example of increasing saturation. I can reset that. I could come in and say, if I turn on that auto mask, it will affect the area that I click. So if I click into the water, I'm going to increase my feather. You can see the feather is the area of the circle. You'll see there's a double circle on the screen. The feather is that area in between. So if I add a point in that blue and I paint that blue, I don't have to worry about getting up into other areas. And that's the only area that it's going to affect. So you can see it did a little bit up into the stairs, but not a whole lot. As long as I keep that inner circle within that blue area, that's what it's adjusting. Okay, and the auto mask does a pretty good job. You'll find some images it works better on than others. Okay, I can add multiple points. So if I come up here and click New, I'm going to add a new point up here on this concrete, and on that new point, I want to take the saturation all the way down, and I can desaturate the concrete up at the top. I'm going to also make it go darker just so you can see kind of where I'm affecting on there. So I can add multiple points to kind of fine-tune on my image what is going on. I've even seen some people make a brush, and this is only in Lightroom 3, where they're going to make a brush, and they call it a skin retouch, and they just lower their clarity down pretty far. Get a small brush here, and come in and paint over the skin tones to kind of smooth out the skin tone on an image, okay? So I'm just doing a real quick job, and we can see if I do on and off, how I've kind of smoothed out the skin tone. I overly accentuated that so you could see it, okay? So that talks you through those custom tools right there. Well, we have 9 minutes left and one last thing to do, and that's talk about how to get our images from Lightroom out so we can do other things with them. So we're going to export those images. So I'm going to jump back to the library module here so we can see a lot of images. If I select a file and I want to get it out, one of the things that I can do is just right-click on it, come down and choose Export. And then I'm going to choose just the Export option. That's going to bring up my export module. When I have that up, I can come in and say, where do I want to export to? I can go to a specific folder. I can put it, so if I chose a specific folder, in this case, it would save it to my desktop. I could put it in a subfolder. So now that's going to put it in a subfolder called Web Class. I can choose to rename it if I wanted to. Choose the type of file, JPEG, PSD, TIFF, DNG, or the original file type. In this case, I want to go to a JPEG. I can set quality settings, which is like your JPEG level 12, level 10. So depending on what you're doing, you can change where that wants to go. Your output color space. Coming down further, I can choose resize options or leave it at its native resolution. I can apply screen sharpening, which I'm not going to on this set. I can choose the amount of metadata that I want to include. I'm going to keep it all. I can add a watermark to it, and I could also set up different options to open that up into Photoshop or run actions on those if I wanted to, which I'm not going to. So in this case, I'm just going to export this one image, and it's going to go to my desktop into a folder called Web Class. I'll say Export, and you'll see we'll get a process bar up here in the upper left corner of our screen. When we minimize that and go to our desktop, there's my new folder called Web Class. If I open up that folder, inside of it you're going to see that image that we just processed out. All well and good, right? So let's come back into Lightroom. One of the things that I like about Lightroom that I can't do with Bridge is I can have multiple exports set up. So in my workflow, I like having a folder for my full res JPEGs. I also like having a folder that has images sized to go to a slideshow application, whether it's Animoto or ProShow Gold or whatever I'm using. I also might like to have a folder that has images that are watermarked that I can put on Facebook. So instead of having to come in every single time under Export and setting up all these criteria for it, I'm going to start creating presets. So one of the things that I often do is choose the option that says same folder as original photo. What this is going to do is start creating subfolders for me. So I'm going to name my first subfolder 01, and I'm going to call it Full Res. In that folder, I want to put JPEGs. I want them at 100%. I want all the metadata in there, and I don't want them sized down. So I'm going to press Add over here on the left side, and I'm going to call this Full Res Export. Okay? So you'll see now under my user presets on the left side, Full Res Export. Now here, let's make the second one. I'm going to call this one for Slideshow. And I'm going to name the folder number 02 to differentiate it. Now for my slideshows, I want to change the image sizing, and I know that I don't want those larger than about 1,500 pixels on the long side. Now I'm typing that in as a square, and it's not going to crop my images to square. It's just going to make them fit in that dimension. Okay? And I'm going to save the quality just a little bit smaller on that so they're not quite so large, so I can upload them a little bit quicker. And I'm going to minimize that embedded metadata. And I'm going to add that one as well. And I'm going to call this Slideshow Export. Okay? And I'm going to do a third one. And on this third one, I'm going to call this one Social Media. So I'm going to go 04 or 03. And social media could be things like Facebook or Twitter or my blog or whatever I'm doing. Same thing, I want to size those down. I'm going to change these just a little bit smaller. And I'm also going to put a watermark on there. And I can set up different watermarks. I'm just going to go with a simple copyright watermark. Verify everything here. I'm going to actually make that a little bit smaller as well. And I'm going to add this one as social media. I can type, there we go, and say create. So now you see I've added some presets over here. So I'm going to hit cancel out of this export. So if I grab a range of images and I right click, come down to export, you'll now see there's my full res export option, there's my slideshow export, and a social media export. So I can choose whichever one of those I want to go to. So I'm going to do the full res export. And we'll see, we'll start processing up here. Now, one of the cool things about Lightroom is it takes advantage of multi-threading capability. You're going, what does he mean when he says that? Well, multi-threading capability means it can do multiple exports at the same time. So you see now I have two different exports going on. I did the social media, and then I did the full res, and I'm going to do a third one and do the slideshow. Oops. I did that one already, so let's do the social media. I got confused there. Now, a quick, easy way to find those files, just right-click on the image. You'll have this option. It's called, I can't do it from here. I'm going to go to the folder in the library to see those actual images, then right-click and say Reveal in Explorer. And I don't know why I'm getting that. It's because I clicked on something wrong. There we go, Show in Finder. That's going to take me to those actual files. Inside that subfolder, there's my full res images that we exported. There's my slideshow images, and there's my social media. And if we look at those, we will see how it has applied the different sizing. You can see the social media ones are a lot smaller. The full res or the full res JPEGs. So setting up export presets is another way to really speed up your workflow. And if you're exporting out a large job, 50, 100, 200 images, divide it up into smaller groups and export them, and they will export a lot faster by doing it that way, because it'll take advantage of the hyper-threading in your computer. Okay. Well, that was a very fast hour and a half, and by no means have I covered everything that you can do in Lightroom, and I just really brushed the surface of a lot of different things. So I'm going to exit out of this screen sharing mode real quick because I have two things for you. First, I'm going to upload a folder for you, or a PDF file, so give me just a second to pull that up for you. And this will give you a little bit more information on the image processing as far as what I'm looking for and the order that I go through to process out those files. And you're going to see a transfer window open up on your screen. And there will be a PDF in that file. And all you need to do is select that file and say download, and that will download that file for you. So you can save that to your desktop or wherever, and that's going to give you some pretty good steps to go through for image adjustment. Also going to give you, let me go to a whiteboard real quick, some other information for further reference. I've got two books that I recommend on Lightroom. Oops, I ought to get a color there that you can see a little bit better. Change that to black. First one is the Adobe Photoshop Lightroom book for digital photographers by Scott Kelby, not Booze, book. And I can't edit that text, so just pretend that says book for me, okay, and make me happy. The second one is, it's also called the Adobe Photoshop 2 book, the complete So the second one is the Adobe Photoshop Lightroom 2 book, the complete guide for photographers. My typing apparently is very poor, so check that one out as well. The difference between the two, I actually own both, and I use both of them for different things. If you're looking just for a good, how do I use Lightroom, what's a good workflow, what do the tools do, and you don't want to get into really in-depth, check out the Scott Kelby book. If you want to understand the nuts and bolts and what's going on behind the scenes and really understand the inner workings of it, check out the book by Martin Evening. The book I have of his is for Lightroom 2. There are Lightroom 3 books by both of those authors. So I'd recommend checking out both of those. Some good information. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's class. As always, thanks for attending. Hopefully picked up some good Lightroom tips out of there. If you're not using Lightroom, maybe it give you a reason to look at it in a little bit more detail. And one of the things that I didn't mention at the beginning that I should have mentioned, you can use Lightroom for RAW or JPEG files and get very good results either way. Thanks for attending. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us here at H&H. There's my contact information up on the screen, my email address and phone number. So feel free to give me a call, drop me an email. If there's anything we can do to help you out, let us know. Have a great day. And this ends the official formal part of our class.